Hi, everybody, it's Julie, and today I thought I would share the card I made for my mom. Today's her birthday, and I wanted to make her a tropical floral card because she was born and raised in Hawaii on the island of Kauai, and I don't have any tropical floral stamps. So I decided to take the Mondo Amaryllis because I have it on good authority from somebody who knows like gardening and stuff like that, that the amaryllis is actually from that genus or species of tropical flowers. So it does qualify as a tropical. It's all on how you color it. So at least that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So I'm going to load some 140-pound Canson XL watercolor paper. This is my favorite go-to watercolor paper. I never have any issues with it. It always blends beautiful for me with whatever watercolor medium I use. So that's what I turn to whenever I want to do watercolor work. And I'm going to take some Distress Oxide ink. This is Fired Brick. And I'm going to stamp twice, which is why I'm using the Misty, because I really need to get that spot on. And I want that ink to be really, really wet so I can heat emboss it. Now, if your Distress Oxide pad is dry and it hasn't been re-inked, or you don't have a re-inker, you can ink up the stamp first with Versamark embossing ink and then ink it up with a layer of the oxide ink and then impress that to your paper. But you'll have to clean it every time before you re-ink, or you'll contaminate your Versamark pad with the oxide ink, obviously. So I did clean off this stamp before I took it off the lid there and repositioned it because I want to have a second impression of my hibiscus flowers. That's what I'm calling them. My faux hibiscus. And I'm going to heat emboss these flowers with some clear detail embossing powder. I really love the effect of this and how it looks. And Distress Oxide inks have become kind of a replacement for pigment inks for me when I need to emboss in color. So I'm going to grab some Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, and I'm laying down 3 different colors. Now, I'm not really trying to fill these leaves, but I did want a real deep saturation of color. So I'm just laying down some broad strokes in 3 different shades of green. One is olive green, one is deep green, and then the other is just called green. And it's funny because they have different tones to them. Deep green has more of a earthy with brown undertones, and then the regular green has bluish undertones, and you don't really see them until you start to blend them out. But anyway, it's a really pretty combination. It kind of gives you this jungle tropical green, very lush feel. So I'm going to take my water brush and just blend these colors out. And because those colors of Zig Clean Color brush markers are so pigmented and saturated, it really doesn't take a lot of water to blend these out. And I have some clean paper towel there so that I can dab my brush if it's too wet, has too much water on it, or if I decide I need to lift some color out. But right now it's looking pretty good. I really wanted that really heavy deep green with this variation of color in it. Now at this point, I have to admit, I loved it just like this with the leaves colored. And part of me wanted to just stop right here and leave it alone. But I didn't know if it really looked all that tropical. So I thought, here I'm pondering. Do I go on further or do I leave it alone? And I think I'll definitely come back and make another one without coloring the blossoms. But I was going for this beautiful hibiscus in the color palette I showed you before, and that image was from Pinterest. So I'm just going to grab this kind of deep yellow color. It's almost got orange undertones to it, and apply that along the flower's perimeter, just hugging those embossing lines and then blending it out with water. And someone has asked me if the Canson watercolor paper is the best watercolor paper for the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. And I'd have to say, in my experience, yes, it works really well with these color brush markers. Even if it's not the Zig, if it's some other brand, it just seems to work much better with Canson watercolor paper than any other watercolor paper that I've tried. So I just stick with it. Now I've taken a carmine red and I just applied some in the center of the flowers to add some contrast there. And then I'm gonna kind of further blend out this yellow. It kind of felt like it was too dark and overpowering. So I'm just going to add some water and lift color out and blend that out a little bit more using paper towel to kind of lift out the color. And then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of dimension to it. And how do you do that without die cutting them out? I mean, you could die cut them out and pop them up and give it some dimension that way. But I thought, I'm just going to grab this blue gray color and go around the outer edges of the leaves and the flowers. And then I'm just very lightly applying that color. And then I'm just going to pull it out and away with my water brush. And I'm not trying to get that whole white space filled with color. I'm just trying to create some shadow and depth around my flower. So I'm just kind of pulling it away from the edges there and then letting it fade out. And I'll just continue working that, letting it fade. And I use the magnets from my Heidi Swap magnetic cutting mat because I wanted it to hold and anchor those points down. So it works right through that water media mat by Waffle Flower. I love that for whenever I do watercolor work, but the magnets work right through that media mat and just held my quarter sheet of watercolor paper down for me. So I thought that was kind of spiffy. And then I wanted to add a little bit more texture, so I took some Distress paint. Now this is not Distress oxide, it's not regular Distress ink, it's Distress paint. And you could also use just a regular black acrylic paint, but I like the dauber on those Distress paints because it's easy to apply to an acrylic block and then spatter it with my water brush. And I get very controlled spatter that way. And I like doing that, and I don't get so much spatter all over my work surface if I use flick it with a paintbrush. But you can do it that way if you have your work surface protected. Now, the great thing about using a black acrylic paint or Distress paint for these spatters is that I decided to come back in and add more pink to the centers of my flowers to really bring out that hue I was going for. I don't know why I didn't do this initially, but I decided later on to come back and do it. But that acrylic paint or the Distress paint dries permanently, so it will not reactivate with water. So you're safe to add more water-based mediums over the top of that, and you're not going to disturb the spatters that you made. So that's really kind of cool. So now you can see the finished effect of these flowers. Oh my goodness, I think that was the tropical floral effect I was going for. And then I heat embossed Happy Birthday on a scrap of vellum cardstock and just wrapped it around. And I did trim that down before mounting it onto an A2 base card. And that finished my birthday card from my mama. Happy birthday, Mama. I love you. Thanks for watching.